Good afternoon, everybody. I get to kick off the presentations for this afternoon. If you've ever looked up in the sky, seen an airplane and thought, I wonder if they're trying to find my wireless access point, I'm here to tell you, they might be. I'm Matt Thomassen, and I'm here to present Warflying in a Cessna, Part 2, Upping Our Game. I work with computers. My day job is security architect. That has pretty much nothing to do with what I'm about to present. But I'm also have my commercial pilot certificate with multi-engine and instrument ratings and airframe and power plant mechanics certificate. And I'm presenting on behalf of myself and my colleague, Sean McKeever, who is not able to be here today, who is a cybersecurity researcher, architect, hacker, race car driver. When I say we, I'm well aware that I'm one person standing up here, but I'm referring to the work that both of us did collectively. We introduced the Warflying project last year at DEF CON. There's a video on the DEF CON YouTube channel. Go check it out for more background. Essentially, war dialing, greetings Professor Falcon, became war driving, and then that has branched off into a number of different war transportation modes. So in our case, war flying, and we're going around collecting data about wireless access points from a small airplane. Typically, we've found it works best to stay around 1,500 feet above the ground, which I will note is a lot lower than airliners usually fly and a lot higher than cars usually drive. So that lets us get some obstacles out of the way because Wi-Fi is very line of sight. So we wanted to see if we take out the obstacles, what can we see? What can we find out? Also, I should say we are still not expert war drivers. And some of this is showing our mistakes and the things that we've learned. Please don't consider this the definitive manual on warflying, that we have solved the warflying problem. This is a progress report, and this is updating what we've done and sharing some information about that. Last year in the presentation, I gave a pretty good safety disclaimer and discussion of airspace. If you are a pilot and are considering doing this, I highly recommend going back and reviewing that to understand those issues. So I won't go into a lot of that here, but I will say one thing. If you are a pilot, rule number one, fly the airplane. Don't get distracted with the shiny electronic gadgets, the laptops, the displays, whatever's going on in the airplane. Your job is to not run into anything, among other things, not run into towers, other airplanes, terrain, and it's low-level maneuvering. So you've got to be right on top of flying the airplane. And as a result of that, while it is possible to do solo warflying, we think it's best done as a team sport. Hence the obligatory cockpit selfie. Most of our data was collected in a Cessna 172, pretty standard small airplane, goes about 120 miles an hour, which is about 176 feet per second. Has 4 seats, has a high wing, and it's constructed of aluminum. So the high wings let us not have wireless signals blocked as much by the wings, but the aluminum fuselage construction will definitely come into play later, so remember that. So last year we presented the project, and we're wondering, is this interesting to anybody? Is this cool? Is this good? And we got some good response from it. So we thought, okay, let's keep going. Last year, what we had collected was essentially a bunch of data validating that we could see some things, but we didn't really know how much we were seeing. We didn't really have a way to measure our equipment and validate what's picking up things well, what can be better. So we wanted to answer some questions. A little background on how do we even see access points? Because Wi-Fi is magic, right? You just turn on your phone and there's the Wi-Fi and boom. No, of course not. Wireless access points generally, and there can be some nuances in configurations, but generally wireless access points are configured to broadcast a beacon packet every 102.4 milliseconds, which is about a tenth of a second, on a particular frequency or a particular channel. So to pick up a beacon packet, we need an antenna within radio range of the access point. We need a radio tuned to the frequency of the access point when the beacon packet is transmitted, and we need something to process the incoming packet. 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi has 14 channels, basically 11 of them are in the US, so we need to either have one radio that is constantly and as quickly as possible cycling through all of the different frequencies to pick up those packets, but there's lag. And there are some good white papers that have been written by the Kismet Project on this problem and trying to cycle through this. Or we get 14 radios with one radio dedicated to each channel that's tuned to that frequency that can just process whatever's coming in there. So after the presentation last year, we got much better connected with the RF Hacker Sanctuary Discord and the War Driver channel. Thank you so much to many who contributed for that, and several people said, hey, you should get a Wi-Fi coconut. As it turns out, there is a device with 14 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi radios built into it. Not only that, a very kind user named Busy Signal, who goes by Busy Signal, offered, hey, I've got a coconut I can send you to support the project. Would you like it? Why, yes. Thank you very much. That's very generous of you. I certainly would. And not only a Wi-Fi coconut, but one of the few in the world that has been modified with an external antenna port. So not only could we test the reception, we could test performance of different antennas. So this is what the coconut setup ended up looking like. Gaff tape to the back of Sean's laptop, because this is a highly professional experiment. Coconut was connected to Kismet running the War Drive overlay, USB-C for power and data connection, and an external antenna. So looking at the setup in the airplane, put a GPS on the glare shield, so then it's got good visibility to the sky to pick up the GPS satellites. First antenna that we were able to test was a whip antenna. So this is mounted in the next to the windshield in the front right seat of the airplane. And remember that because you'll need that later. It's longer than a quarter wave, so should have some gain to it. We oriented it vertically, hoping that most of the access points had vertical polarization. So the effective radiation pattern that we're expecting from it is basically a donut. So it's going to be omnidirectional, and we'll get whatever is coming that we can see from whatever direction that is in. Antenna number 2 is a panel antenna, and the radiation pattern of that is basically straight out the face of the antenna. This also was taped in the front right seat of the airplane. Sean actually put some quality gaff tape on the window and then taped the antenna on over the gaff tape. Quick note, if you're doing this, be careful and use high quality gaff tape, because aircraft windows are absurdly expensive. They're plexiglass, but anything that gets attached to an airplane is like 10 times the price that it should be, so you don't want to go damaging your windows for the sake of taping an antenna to them. So please be careful with that. I'll note there are some, I'm here reporting some mistakes that we've made. Looking at this picture, I realized we actually have this antenna mounted backwards. So the reception that was supposed to be going out the side of the airplane is actually coming into the airplane, and so we do have some reception off the back side of the antenna, but not as much as there should be. But effectively, still, our reception is going straight out the side of the airplane. So keep that in mind. Question, oh, and one other thing we had said in the Discord, we actually were given a Yagi antenna. We unfortunately have not been able to make that work with the Coconut yet, and so we really, really want to do that, and didn't work. So bummed about that. Why haven't you put an antenna outside the airplane? I dearly, dearly want to, but when you start attaching things to an airplane, the level of both the level of paperwork and the level of safety that has to be considered go up substantially. And the guidance on this is not that great, so I haven't figured out how to do it both legally and safely, because I really don't want, for one thing, so an antenna, anything mounted to the outside of the airplane has to be able to withstand sustained 150 mile an hour winds. I don't want to lose an antenna off the airplane and have to call the control tower and say, hey, we think we lost an antenna, can you shut down the runway and go do a FOD inspection on it? I don't want it to fall off and hit somebody. I don't want it to fall off and go back into the flight controls and mess with the control surfaces. So I would love to do this. If you have any experience with this, if you're with the FAA and have any information about how to do this safely and legally, please let me know, because I would love to do that. As a control for reference data, we also ran my phone, running wiggle. Left side of the airplane, there's a little grab handle by the window, and I'm expecting that the Wi-Fi antennas on the phone are near the top, so they can see through the plexiglass, hopefully kind of sort of well going down to the ground. Oops. That was too fast. Okay, let's go fly. So this is a view from Sean's seat. This is flying over Metro Detroit at 1,500 feet. And then his side of the airplane, you can see the whip antenna mounted there. So one of the big things we wanted to do this year was create some visualizations to see what the data was looking like. So I did, as the cool kids call it now, some vibe coding, and generated some Python scripts to take the data points that we were seeing, because we're basically working with Wiggle CSV files, because the Wiggle app exports those nicely, and Kismet, whatever data it collects, can also be exported to a Wiggle CSV file. So collected a few different metrics. This is a whole flight just from my phone. We've got total points, unique max, and I apologize in advance for the eye charts, although these projectors are nice and big, so hopefully. Also, this will all be posted on GitHub, and I'll post links in the RF Hacker Sanctuary Discord, so you can go back and look at these a little more closely if you want to. Total max, unique max, some time. Last year we introduced the max per minute metric, so this was 441 total max per minute and 106 unique max per minute. And then I did some experimenting with detection categories of how many times we saw a particular access point, because one of the questions I've been wondering is, how much time do we have that we're able to see a particular access point, and how fast, because we're moving 176 feet per second past whatever we might be trying to detect. So it was interesting to see, and it worked out pretty well to break it down into 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5+ detections, and then categorize the detection points that way. So you can see based on the colors how many times we saw it, and then some distance calculations. These are the max distance between any two particular detections, or any two detections of a particular MAC address. So this is not necessarily how far we were, because we don't know where the access point is. We know where we were when we detected it. But even with my phone for this run, there were 34 access points that we were a maximum at least 2 miles away from in our detections of it. So we were at least 1 mile away from those access points. So then this is the beginning of collecting the data with the Coconut. Started with a whip antenna. You can see some breaks in the data where the antenna was getting connected and disconnected. Got that going, and then Sean tested the panel antenna, and we collected this, and then went down. So this slide, we're showing, I'm flying from north down to the south, and then I'm flying right-handed turns. So most of the data that we've been collecting so far has just been in lines. So we can see alongside or along that line where we saw the access points. But we wanted to start to see, can we try to fill in this map by detecting the same access points from different directions? So flying right turns, you see that those loops started to fill in, and we start to get some two-dimensionality to our map and probably some better location information about where these access points are. Also keep in mind, these turns were to the right, so we're passing things on the right, and the panel antenna is mounted on the right. Also, we're banking the airplane to the right, because when you turn an airplane, you bank the wings, and so that points the lobe of the reception, if there is one, that points it down more towards the ground. As a comparison, looking at my phone, not nearly as much data collected by my phone. Oh yeah, also 278 max per minute, which I think is the top that we saw on any of these data collection runs. My phone, not nearly as fast. The other thing to note with this is we did start to see where we were passing things that we'd already seen on the left. We started to see those filling in. And then wanted to go fly some circles, so I did. This was a solo war flight. I bothered the good citizens of Lake Orion, Michigan on a Saturday morning and went to try to fly some circles to see where can we, at what point can we start to fill in that map of detections. So then we decided to do a test with a grid pattern, comparing the coconut with the whip antenna, coconut with panel antenna. I kept writing coconut with whip in my notes, and I'm like, that kind of sounds like a good dessert, but coconut with panel just doesn't have the same ring. Anyway, then comparing those to my phone. Flying over the northern suburbs of Metro Detroit, approximately 10-mile east-west legs and approximately 1-mile north-south distance between the legs. There's nothing magic to that. That just happens to be about the distance that you get when you do a relatively benign turn flying in a 172. And so we tried to fly approximately the same pattern twice. So this is the first run with the panel antenna. And you'll notice some burbles there. Some of that is not me flying perfectly straight, because I'm just don't have an autopilot, just hand flying all of this. A couple of those burbles are, there's traffic going in and out. So we were talking to Detroit Approach Control to get, to make sure that we were, to get traffic advisories, and watching ADS-B, which from a privacy and security perspective is terrible, and from a safety perspective is awesome, because I could see stuff on ForeFlight, already planning. Approach control calls up traffic. Okay, we can resolve that. Panel antenna, then this is the whip antenna, and you see again where we're passing things on the right that we've already passed, those start to fill in. And then I wanted to compare the two, so I came up with this visualization. Blue dots are data set 1, and this is comparing two Wiggle CSV files. Blue dots are data set 1, yellow dots are data set 2, and green dots are points that we saw in both data files. So for the panel antenna and the whip antenna with the coconut, we saw a lot of green. For the panel antenna, or for really for both of the coconut runs compared to the phone, we saw almost zero overlap. So one of the things this really strongly tells us is the fuselage of the airplane is blocking reception from the opposite side, which we expected, but this really tells us that. And then I also was comparing the performance and noticed that the phone was doing way better than I expected it to do. So when all else fails, go back to the source data and realized, oh wow, the channel numbers in the Wiggle CSV file are really high. Oops, I've been collecting 5 gigahertz data too, in addition to 2.4 gigahertz data. And so I went and checked and separated out the 2.4 gigahertz, the 5 gigahertz, realized I was collecting about 5 times as many access points on 5 gigahertz. So wow, there's a lot of 5 gigahertz out there, because I was thinking 2.4 gigahertz should be enough for anybody, but apparently wasn't right about that. Can you warfly from an airliner? This came to me in the clarity of thought that only comes when you're half asleep on an airliner at midnight coming into DEF CON last year, and realized I've got my phone, it's in airplane mode, but I can get GPS and I can get Wi-Fi, and I'm sitting by a window seat. Hey, let's fire it up, see what I can pick up. And of course, it lit up like a Christmas tree with all the access points on the airliner, but was able to filter those out. And it turns out you can warfly from an airliner. At least I hope you can, because I have. You don't get a lot, but you get some data. And so this is something simple, accessible. If you happen to have a window seat, let's make Wiggle a little bit more 3D. So did that a few times. 000D97, last year when we were doing our data collection and looking at statistics for maximum ranges, access points with the OID 000D97 kept popping up as some of the top distances. So I went back, and I still don't know what they are, but was curious how they would show up. So I took all of our data files and just grepped out that OID, and this is the map. So there are a lot of them out there. If you know what these are, I would be very interested to know. And then for a final test, we wanted to compare war driving versus war flying. And since we're from Metro Detroit, we love Woodward Avenue. So Sean fired up his Honda Civic with the same laptop running Kismet and the Coconut, and I had the panel antenna at that time, so he used the whip antenna. War drove Woodward. And so we see this is the direct comparison of war flying the same route versus war driving the same route with the exact same setup. The whip antenna, the Coconut, and Kismet. And came to the same conclusion as last year, that war driving picks up more access points, but war flying picks them up faster. And there's a fair degree of overlap here between access points that were seen by both the warflight and the war drive. Comparing then war flying with the panel antenna versus war driving with the whip antenna, interesting thing is here there's almost no overlap between those. So we really think that the gain pattern of the panel antenna that is supposed to be shooting straight out the side of the window is picking up access points that are a lot farther away. And so one of the things that we want to experiment with going forward is different angles of the panel antenna to try to get better reception closer toward the ground, because we're 1,500 feet up, and so it's a bit more distance horizontally before we would pick something up on even the lower lobes of that. And then finally, comparing the panel antenna versus the whip antenna, these are both warflights with the Coconut, and we see more overlap here. See definitely better performance with the whip antenna, which was surprising to me, but again, we think it's pretty clear that there's needs to be consideration of the orientation of that antenna. So what did we find out? Phones are definitely usable for warflying. So if you're a pilot, if you have a friend that's a pilot and want to go do this, don't think that you have to go set up a big war driving rig. As much as I would love to get a good busy signal rig into the back of the airplane and go warfly with it, you can go collect data, have fun, but be safe and don't let the phone distract if you're trying to collect data while you're warflying. The fuselage of the airplane, I think we've got really good data that it's blocking a lot. So we've got to be very careful with how our antennas are placed. And again, I would love to get an antenna outside the airplane, want to get the Yagi working. And the antenna orientation definitely matters. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Thank you to the RF Village for the opportunity to present to the RF Hacker Sanctuary. That's a super fun Discord server. Thank you to Busy Signal for providing us with the specially modified Coconut. Thank you to Detroit Approach Control for letting us go fly some really weird patterns in your airspace. And thank you to the Wiggle and Kismet projects for creating some great communities and some great tools to let us go collect this data. Thank you. Enjoy DEF CON.